Hello, my name is Bob Tribe, and welcome to Valley to Vietnam. Valley to Vietnam is a joint effort between the Sacramento Public Library and the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 500. It is our intent to trace the arc of experience between Sacramento and Vietnam for our local Vietnam-era vets. Today, our guest is Cliff Threlkeld, who served a one-year tour in Vietnam in 1968-69. Cliff also happens to be someone I've known since we were 12 years old. So, Cliff, thank you for your service and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
First of all, let's start off, where were you born?
San Mateo.
San Mateo, California. Okay. Yep. So you were born during World War II.
Right, 1943 I was born.
And your dad, was he in the service?
He was in the service. He volunteered right after Pearl Harbor.
And what was he doing?
He joined the Navy, and he was initially on a sub chaser in the Caribbean. Then he was in the European theater. Italy was the Battle of Salerno and a couple of others. And then he was in the Pacific theater at the end of the war.
Okay.
And he was on the navigation team for the Admiral Nimitz's fleet.
So like me, you probably didn't see your dad for a while.
No, from what my mom lived with my grandmother in her house in San Mateo, and I don't think I was 2 or 2.5, oh, maybe 2. Anyway, I was born in October, so before I saw him, and he came back after the war was over in the Pacific, and so.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of us born during that time who didn't see our dads and probably got spoiled by our mothers, and then faced a new tough regime when our fathers came home.
Yeah.
I can kind of vaguely remember that. So you spent, say, the first 5 years or so of your life in San Mateo County.
In San Mateo County, Belmont, living with my grandmother in my parents' new house. They built a house down there.
And so you left there, though.
I left. We left when I think I finished kindergarten, and we left and moved to Eureka. My dad was in the trucking business, truck sales, and the lumber industry in Eureka was going gangbusters in those days.
I'll bet.
And so he and another man formed a big General Motors truck dealership in Eureka.
Did you tell me at one point that your dad also had some shipping going on where they were moving stuff by sea, or am I confusing that with?
No, he was always into moving big logs.
Okay. So you came to Sacramento when?
We moved from Eureka in the summer of my 7th to the 8th grade. So I was like 12 or
so that
13,
would have been
something like that.
1956.
Right.
Yeah.
And we fortunately moved about, I don't know, was it 3/4 of a mile from you, where you lived?
Yeah.
Right. We both went to the same, that's where I met you at school.
I first met you when we started 8th grade at Stark King School.
Yeah.
And then after that, you went to El Camino High School.
Went to El Camino High School. We had a good time at El Camino High School. I enjoyed that. I lived right around the corner from school, so I remember we used to always stop by my house and have a snack or something on the way home when you were coming home.
What do you remember about growing up in Sacramento? I mean, what sort of things did you do? Where'd you go?
You know, in those days, it was just like American graffiti. All that stuff was going on. We used to go to Mel's and we used to go down to the river, down to River Park and all that area from, say, the White Avenue Bridge east. There wasn't anything there. It was all gravel pits and all that stuff.
No bike trail. And
yeah, we used to hang around out there and go shooting and race around in our bicycles. And
we had BB gun fights.
BB gun fights. Yeah. Yes, we used to do that. That was a lot of fun.
Without face masks. Luckily, we didn't lose any eyes or anything.
No. And cruising the main downtown, the drive-in, that sort of stuff. That was fun in high school.
So what sort of jobs did you have, in Sacramento before you left for college?
I got a job when I was 15. I remember I had to get a special work permit. I worked for Miles and Miles. It was high-end ladies dress store on Fulton Avenue. I used to help them. I was the odd man out. I would come in every day after school. My mom would actually drive me to school until I got my driver's license. And she'd pick me up at school and take me down so I could work, and I hauled all the garbage and unpacked stuff and did whatever, painted, whatever.
Everything that required a little labor.
Right.
And that was, if I remember right, that was down close to Town and Country Bowling Alley.
It was on Fulton Avenue.
Right, near Cottage.
Near Cottage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an old building.
Right.
Old house.
Yeah.
You did a lot of work. I learned a lot of stuff.
Well, you were always kind of a handy guy. You know how to do stuff, and while many of the rest of us were klutzes, you had that kind of innate ability, I remember.
My dad taught me a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So after graduation from El Camino High School, you went to American River College.
Went to American River College, and I spent 2.5 years there, something like that. I got my AA degree in science. My father always wanted me to be an engineer, and by the time I got out of high school, I was kind of convinced that maybe I wanted to be one too, so I took all the prerequisites to go there, and I worked the whole rest of the time. And while I was, most of the time towards the end of high school, I say probably my senior year, and all the time I was at American River, I worked for this independent contractor character named Babe Arganti. He would take these, get repossessed houses, and we would go in and refinish them and fix them up and try and resell them.
I remember at one point we took over like a whole subdivision.
Yeah.
And he just gave us spray equipment, and we'd be spraying the exterior of homes in about 4 hours. Not the greatest paint job, but we'd just look at all these homes and think, oh my God. And it was amazing in a lot of these repos where people would tear up the hardwood floors for firewood.
Yep.
Would steal the toilets, the sinks, you know, you name it. And we had to, of course, make all these places functional.
Yep.
So it was good to learn those kind of skills.
Yep.
And he paid pretty well.
I learned a lot. I learned how to install toilets and sinks and plumbing.
Yeah.
We did everything.
Right.
And, it was fun.
What did he pay us, like $2.25 an hour?
$2.25. I got up to $2.75.
Yeah, I think I got up to $2.50.
And
but you were more adept than me.
Working. I did a lot of work. I used to work all weekend, after school.
Yeah. You were saving up money.
Saving money to go to college.
Yeah.
My parents were my dad's job didn't. The trucking business was started to go down by then, and they didn't have as much money as they did before. And my mom actually started working at the yardage, one of those yardage stores.
I remember that.
She worked there for years, one at country club, and so that's what I did, earned money. And then I finished at AR, and I was getting ready to go to school. It was mid-year, and I was going to go to Cal. And about that time,
and you were accepted at Cal.
Yeah, I was getting in, and I was amazed that I got in. But I did, and I wanted to be a civil engineer. And so about that time, Mario Savio had that school all in an uproar, and they had occupied part of the engineering building and engineering department. And I just looked at it and I said, you know, I'm going to be spending all my money just to finish these last 2 years of college.
Right.
And I got to be able to get my classes, and I got to get out in that time because I'm not going to run out of money.
So you went to Pullman, Washington.
Pullman, Washington.
Yeah, right close to the Idaho border.
8 miles, yeah.
8 miles.
Right near the University of Idaho, just right across at Moscow.
And Idaho had that convenient law that you could drink if you were 18.
Yep. It was
so
great.
I imagine you guys spent a little time in Idaho.
Yep.
And so you got into the engineering program there. And one of the interesting projects you worked on was the Saturn rocket system.
Oh yeah, I had to, having worked most of the time while I was in school, I was used to doing it. And so I got a job through the school at the Albrook's Hydraulics Laboratory, which is still a national level laboratory, hydraulics laboratory up there in Washington. And they were working on these models of these rocket engine muffler energy dissipators. And I got to be the flunky in that group of guys. There are a lot of doctors, PhD level engineer and designers and scientists working on this thing, and they were working on the design for that muffler, and apparently the WSU design was one of the ones that NASA ended up adopting part of it, and it was really amazing when they set one of those things off. They would use the compressed air.
Right.
You know, it was not real big, and but man, it would. The whole building would start wiggling, and the thing wasn't very big. I mean, it was small. It's
something we kind of grew up with, because with Aerojet here and Douglas here, they were constantly testing, rockets out here in the sort of the northeast or the eastern portion of the county, and you'd hear rockets going off all the time, and it was just part of your life. And
they would set off those rocket motors, and you hear them run for 5-10 minutes, and then they shut off.
Right.
Yeah.
You graduated from WSU.
WSU
in early.
I went there 5 semesters.
Okay.
And I finished off in 5 semesters, and I finished. The classes ended in December or something like that, and so in January I packed up my stuff and headed home. I bought I didn't have a car, but I had a motorcycle, and I bought a '47 Chevy and took the back seats out of it and took my motorcycle apart and put it in the back along with all my other stuff.
And then said a little prayer that 47 Chevy would get you back home again.
Yep.
Yeah, $100. So you were recruited by PG&E.
Yes, I was recruited. I had a job before I got out of school.
Okay.
PG&E came up and recruited people in the engineering department. I got a job offer from them in their construction department, and they had just started building a Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant then. And that's where I thought I was going. And I got here, got home, Sacramento, and I dropped all my stuff off with my mom, and I jammed down to San Francisco, found out I was working in Brisbane. I was working for maybe 3 months, and PG&E was trying to get me a draft deferment.
So you were sent to basic training, and where did you go to basic?
Went to basic training in Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Ugh.
There was a whole plane load of kids from Sacramento. Whole airplane. They had a chartered airplane. They filled it up.
Wow.
And we all showed up at Fort Polk and went, uh-oh.
Yeah, and we talked, when I went in with a bunch of college op guys who were all going to eventually go to OCS, so we had a huge, probably better than 50% of our basic training company were college graduates. But you happen to be like maybe the only college graduate.
There was 1 or 2 of us, and they come to find out we arrive at Fort Polk. Actually, we're getting on the plane, and I have an asterisk by my name on my orders. And I said, what does that mean? And he says, you're in charge of all these guys.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy. Anyway, fortunately, we didn't make any stops, so many of them could get off.
Good. So you're going down there just when it's starting to warm up a little bit, temperature-wise.
Yep.
Lots of snakes and mosquitoes
and humidity.
Humidity,
It got hot there, but like it does here, but the humidity was just awesome.
It's pretty tough.
And it made the basic training difficult for a lot of people.
Suddenly people are, instead of grad school or life with PG&E, people are screaming at you and making you do a lot of push-ups and running everywhere.
And you're sweating like nobody's business.
Okay, so you do 8 weeks of that, and normally you'd go to advanced infantry training, or advanced individual training, depending on what your MOS is.
A lot of the guys in my training company went to heavy infantry, which I guess is mortar battalion.
Like mortar platoons. And
mortar platoons, right.
Yeah.
And so we're all lined up there and getting our orders, and everybody's gone except me. They had buses there, and they call your name, everybody fall out, go over there and get on the bus. And at the end, there's just me. I'm standing there going, this is either good or really bad.
And
it turned out good.
You end up becoming they come over to you, the sergeant does, and says, how would you like to be company clerk?
Yeah.
Which is a great duty.
It's a great duty.
Get your own room. You
Right.
don't have to do guard duty.
I was a member of the
KP.
permanent party. I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, except make sure that company's run pretty well.
I'm thinking this is pretty good, and I had really great duty, had my own room. I got up after the troops were out of the barracks, had the latrines and everything to myself.
Yeah.
It was walk in the mess hall and no one would mess with you or anything.
With just about a year left in your
Yep.
service time, your commitment time, you get orders for Vietnam.
Yes.
You flew into Tan Son Nhut?
Fly into Tan Son Nhut. I was assigned to the first logistic command, my first assignment, which was, come to find out, I thought I was going to be in a transportation organization. Come to find out, it was just a big holding company for new people coming into the country.
What became known as the Repo Depot.
Repo Depot, right.
Yeah.
And so I was assigned to the headquarters area command in Saigon. Again, a very lucky assignment. And our office was in a villa, big compound, villa compound. It was nice and clean. We had air conditioning for most part. Lots of all officers, headquarters. Very few enlisted men, and those that were E7s, E8s. Our sergeant major was there and everything. And so I was in the mailroom, and I was an E4 then and there was 2 of us in the mailroom, and I used to handle quite a bit of the classified documents because they got me a security clearance, and the other mail clerk didn't want anything to. He was a regular Army guy, and he didn't want to be there either, and he was getting out, and he didn't want to deal with it. All the rigmarole you have to do when dealing with classified material. Oh, I forgot to tell you about the barracks. The barracks at Tan Son Nhut were another adventure.
It wasn't like the headquarters where you
it
worked.
The headquarters was like going to the Sheridan. The barracks was going like to the barn.
Yeah.
Because we lived in this huge converted warehouse. There must have been a couple of hundred guys in there. And everybody, we had double bunks with mosquito nets over them. And most of the people in that barracks, except for maybe 10 or 12 of us who worked in the headquarters, enlisted guys, the new enlisted guys, the non-commissioned officers, they had a lot better barracks than we did. And all of the guys in there worked in the morgue at Tan Son Nhut. And so they were a strange group of guys. They had an awful job, I'm sure. But they would be coming and going all hours of the day and night, so it was very hard to get sleep.
Very hard to stay asleep.
Stay asleep. There's all the airport traffic going on. There was all of that as well. It was okay. It was a lot better than the sleeping in the dirt. Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to my, I'm going at the promotion board. And the head of the promotion board is the major who is the commander of the engineering battalion.
Oh.
So, the district engineer is what they call him.
And your paperwork probably showed that you were an engineer.
Yeah, I was a graduate engineer, and he goes, "What are you doing in the mailroom?"
Good question.
I said, "Do you want to work for me?" And I said, "Absolutely, sir." And there wasn't a lot of military people. It was mostly third country nationals. All the heavy-duty engineering was done by Philippine engineers from the Philippines.
Okay.
All the drafting was done by Vietnamese. We had a couple of Vietnamese engineers. In fact, Mr. Bing, he was an older gentleman. Must have been aristocratic because he was very knowledgeable and had been schooled in Europe and everything. But he did all of his math on an abacus.
Wow.
And
so what sort of projects did you work on?
I personally did a lot of warehouse conversion design, rebuilding the floors so they could handle all the weight from all the goods and supplies we were putting in there, putting in fire systems, did some air conditioning work. As the enlisted man in that organization. Whenever we got a field design, that is work out on the perimeter or outside of town, that needed someone to go to, I was the only one that could carry a weapon. And so you couldn't go outside of the secure perimeter without carrying a weapon. And so when we would get, say, a fortification request or something like that outside of the city, I got to go to do, I would do all the field work, all the field measurements, or work with the people out at, say, an artillery fire base or something.
Right.
Working on whatever they needed to do. We did a lot of water systems. We did some fortifications. I did a couple of big ammunition bunkers.
So you go out to these sites where the guns are going constantly.
Oh, yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you know, howitzers and cannons and
Right.
And they typically have an infantry platoon or company guarding the place.
Yeah,
and
right.
They'd get hit by incoming stuff.
Yep, yep.
So
You could always, I was only at a fire base once that got under a severe attack, and I got stuck there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get back out. I was always fly on a resupply helicopter, coming in and out.
Right. Well, that made your job a little more interesting.
Oh yeah, it was
know.
very interesting. Yeah.
Now, things got a little more exciting in Saigon during Tet in early
yes.
'68.
Early '68 was a real interesting time. Before that, the town was pretty loose.
Yeah.
And you could go out, you weren't supposed to go out at night, but there was no curfew. You could go out at night. There was a lot of GIs, who were headquartered in Saigon, who were living in their own apartments and stuff, especially the higher level non-commissioned officers. A lot of them had their own had their girlfriends, and some of them even had families, you know.
Yeah.
And when Tet hit, the Vietnamese army, which controlled the city, the United States was there just to support them. We had a lot of combat troops there too, but in the city, they still controlled the city because that was their capital and everything. And they put on a 24/7 curfew. I mean, it was tight. You could go out in the daytime, few hours, but for the first, say, 3 or 4 days of the attack, and the attack was mostly in the coming out of the Chinese sector into town. Because the Chinese sector, first of all, was built very tight, and second of all, the Chinese didn't like the Vietnamese anyway, and so they didn't talk much, and so a lot of these Viet Cong guys were actually had Chinese relations.
Yeah.
So, let's say. So anyway, they'd be normal citizens in the daytime, and then at night they'd come out and start blowing stuff up and shooting and attacking outposts and whatever. And so we were on curfew for several months after that.
And your hotel got hit by a rocket?
I moved from the warehouse to a hotel. And the hotel, a lot of the barracks, the BEQs in Saigon were old hotels, older hotels, not the new ones, but the Rex Hotel was a 5-star hotel downtown, and that's where the command staff lived. But I used to go pick up my major every once in a while down there.
Okay.
But I lived in a hotel, the Quezon Hotel. It was a nice, serviceable hotel. We had 2 guys to a room. They were not real big rooms, but 2 guys to a room. You had a shower, your own shower. That was really something. And we had air conditioning because we were the engineers. Most of the engineers lived in that building.
So you made sure it worked.
Yeah. And we had fresh water.
And you describe it as roaches, rats, mosquitoes, and lice.
The whole city was just filthy, constant. They wouldn't pick up garbage for, as soon as the attack started, they wouldn't pick up garbage. It wouldn't do. The sewer system failed in a lot of parts of the city. It was just bad.
So the whole city had a certain scent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a smell you never get used to.
So, you know, lucky for you, I mean, what I was impressed with is PG&E gives you qualifying, you know, retirement time for the time that you were in the Army.
Yes.
So you came back and went right back into PG&E in March of '69.
Right.
And So then you worked for PG&E for 28 years. And what was your final position at PG&E?
I was the director of operations, maintenance, construction for the hydro generation facilities in the entire system.
Okay.
They stretch from north up past Chico, Oroville, south to Bakersfield.
You had about 250 people working for you. Do you
Yes.
think that Army time kind of helped you as learning to be a supervisor?
To some degree, but no, not.
Mainly it showed you what you didn't want to do.
Showed me what I didn't want to do. I learned to be a supervisor the hard way, the way most supervisors learn to supervise, by making mistakes. In the end, I thought I was a pretty good supervisor. My crews liked me, and I liked them. And when it came time to downsize at PG&E, many of them were going to be downsized, and I just decided I was going to go with them.
So you went to work for East Bay Mud, and
Right.
there you were the manager of the water supply division?
Right. I had a division. I ended up with a division in the district. We supplied water to the entire East Bay. But most of my work was outside of Oakland, in the mountains with the dams and the power plants, just like it was with PG&E, and the big pipelines and pumping plants. So that's what I did.
Good career.
It was a good career. I loved it. But in 2008, I retired, and I live in Walnut Creek now, and I play piano.
And you have a nice wife and two terrific
grown
daughters who are
right.
both married
married.
and grandkids. And
Yep. And I've except for the time I've spent talking to you about Vietnam, I haven't talked about it in 30 years.
Yeah. Well, that concludes our time on Valley to Vietnam. I'd like to thank Cliff for your service and say thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Welcome
thank
home.
you.
For the Valley to Vietnam producer Jerry Ward, director James Scott, I'm Bob Tribe saying farewell and look forward to you joining us on the next time on Valley to Vietnam.